Hi, apologies for starting just a bit late. My name is Ed Lazowska. I'm from Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington, and it's a tremendous pleasure to welcome you here today for the launch of the UW Tech Policy Lab. This is an exciting event, and let me just say a word about why it's so important, but you have a card on your chairs that I think explains it quite well. There have been many years of policymakers trying to make policy and technology without knowledge of the technology and how it works. And there have been many years of technologists trying to influence policy without any understanding of how society uses its technology and how laws are made, and on and on. So the goal here is to bring together top-tier technologists, top-tier legal scholars, and top-tier social scientists from our information school, and have them work closely together in guiding technology policy from those three sources of expertise. We are thrilled that Microsoft has provided funding to launch this initiative. You'll hear more about that later, but it's wonderful for the University of Washington, wonderful for the Pacific Northwest, and I hope wonderful for the nation, because there are relatively few centers anything like this around the country, and bringing together these collective sorts of expertise is just critically important to the future. Let me take a minute and welcome a few members of the audience, or identify them here. The heads of the relevant units are here, so let me welcome Kelly Testi from the School of Law, the dean, and Harry Bruce from the Information School. Harry has had some difficult medical problems over the past 6 months as a result of an auto accident on his way back from the Gates Foundation, and it's great to see Harry here in vertical once again. Hank Levy, the chair of Computer Science and Engineering. I also want to welcome Representative Ross Hunter, who's joined us here today. We're pleased to have Ross in the audience. And finally, Allison Rosenberg from Microsoft, who has played just an essential role in getting this program launched, and we appreciate that enormously. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to University of Washington President Mike Young to say a few words, and he will pass it down the line. Thank you all for being here.
I can't tell you how excited I am about this enterprise and how grateful we are to Microsoft to making this possible. I've thought a lot about the relationship between technology and policy and law and economics and everything involved in that for a long time, and have been distressed that we seem to operate these on very different paths. I was at another university before I came here, and had a wonderful friend who won a Nobel Prize for a particular technology that allowed him to knock out a gene in a mouse. So you could breed the mouse without this particular gene, and then by observing the behavior of the mouse or the non-behavior of the mouse, you could tell what function that gene had. And we got in a conversation one day about, why is this work best done in a university? Why not in a pharma lab? Why not in somebody's garage? This is really an interesting idea. What does a university bring to the table? And he said to me something that has always stuck with me. He said, Mike, he said, at the end of the day, he said, I'm going to be able to tell you how to clone a human being. He says, we'll figure that out. It isn't going to be as hard as you think, which it should be worrisome, by the way, to all of you. But he says, I can't tell you whether you should. And I can't tell you what the political implications of that will be. And he says, I have no idea what the economic implications of that are going to be, or the social implications of that. I don't know what that's going to do to society and to the world. And he said, we need to be in a university to be able to bring all of that together to bear on these issues. And I think today's event is a really clear sign of exactly that. We have three wonderful professors who are going to head this up. And I've had a chance to get to know each of them a little bit in some of the work they do, which has been absolutely fascinating but central to this. For example, Professor Kono does an enormous amount of work in the area of security of devices. Now, what's that mean exactly? Well, it means that when you go out to your cars today, he can make the brakes not work from his cell phone. Now, no, most of us don't think about that. We don't think that all that computer stuff in our car fundamentally has no security system attached to it. You can turn your car on and off, he can blow it up, he can do... Now, he's a good guy and he isn't going to do that. You're going to be safe going home. But think of the policy implications of that. How many of you have ever watched Homeland? Okay, then you know what I'm going to talk about next, which is he could kill the vice president, which they apparently did on the show, because pacemakers, if you think about how a pacemaker is installed, basically they put it in and then they run a little test and see, they fibrillate you and then see if it defibrillates you. And if it doesn't, they adjust it with a computer. It's wireless. And when you think about the implications of that, of the security dimension of that, it's just one small example of the kinds of things that we have to be thinking about and have to address. And the capacity to bring together this institute that brings the best and the brightest, not only from the 3 schools that are involved. Very important to have our terrific high school, our computer science department, one of the very best in the world, and our great law school all together in one room, speaking the different languages they speak, but apparently with translators who will be there to help them. But we also have Microsoft as a partner in this, one of the great technology companies in the world. And it is that vision and that foresight that we're celebrating today, their willingness to help us put together people who can really think from these very disparate perspectives about these issues. And the issues are incredibly broad. I'm a lawyer, and I apologize for that, but nevertheless I am. I have to tell you, technology has changed my field in ways that we never really think very much about. I'll give you a couple of examples. Now we can file court cases online. We don't have to take a whole lot of paper and kill a whole lot of trees. You just press some buttons and all the documents go to the court. This sounds simple. This sounds like a small move in technology, but let me tell you what it does. Because court documents are public records, now things that people would have had to pay somebody to go down to the court, flip through the records, Xerox them, and bring them to a reporter at the Seattle Times. That reporter at the Seattle Times can sit there in her bathrobe at her computer at home and find out everything about it. Think about a bankruptcy case. Not only is the information of the bankrupt there, but the information about all the creditors. If you ever loaned money to anybody who went bankrupt, your records are publicly available and easily searched. What are the policy implications of that? Take the First Amendment, another example. Technology turns it entirely on its head. We think about, for example, that at the end of the day, we can do we can stop a television station from saying bad words on their TV shows. You can do what we call prior restraint. You can stop things from being broadcast. You can't do that with the newspaper. They can say whatever they want, however they want. It just simply doesn't matter. What's the theory behind that? The theory is that the bandwidth for television is somewhat limited and therefore has to be allocated in some particular way. Public good is the only way we can think of, and that allows us to define to some degree what the content is, which is normally something we really don't permit the government to do. Newspapers, on the other hand, everybody can print a newspaper. All you have to do is have a little ink printer and you can print a newspaper, so we can't control newspapers. But the truth of the matter is we sit in our homes and get 500 stations. There's no limit now on the technology with respect to broadcast medium. Every major city has one newspaper. So we can control the thing that is fundamentally unlimited as a practical matter, and we can't control the thing that is limited. All of this is technologically generated, and yet the capacity to think about the implications of that are absolutely crucial to our society going forward. And so it is wonderful to have an opportunity to create here an institution, bringing together technology, bringing together policy, bringing together law, bringing together the kind of insight from each of these different areas, along with a strong perspective from the business community and all of our other participants here at this university to do this. So I just hope you know how grateful we are for what you've made possible here. I hope you know how transformative that can be as we think about the implications of all of this technology in this really profound way. We are deeply grateful to Microsoft. And I'm deeply grateful to these deans and these great professors who are going to make this possible here at this university. So with that, let me introduce one of the people to whom we are mostly grateful, and that's Brad Smith, who's the general counsel at Microsoft. And on his name card, I saw this the other day, and I think this is probably right. It says Chief Visionary. Brad, we believe that. Thank you.
Well, thank you to President Young. Thanks to all of you for coming this afternoon. And it's a great pleasure for Peter Lee and me to be here from Microsoft. We are thrilled to have the opportunity to help start what I think is going to be an initiative of genuinely global significance with our corporate donation of $1.7 million to get the Tech Policy Lab started and moving forward. We've done this for several reasons. First, it solves, we believe and we hope, an important problem. The problem is this. At a time of big data and all kinds of technological advances, we still see every day in capitals around the world government officials trying to make technology policy decisions, sometimes with no data. And as we all know, any of us who happen to turn on a television set or read anything on the internet, anybody can have an opinion. You can have an opinion on anything. It's actually helpful if your opinion is grounded in some facts. And I think what this Tech Policy Lab gives us the opportunity to do is really bring together on a multidisciplinary basis the faculty and the students and others from three great parts of a great university. The second reason I'm personally so excited about this is because I've seen what this kind of multidisciplinary approach can do, personally. And I hope that some of what we've done inside our company, especially in the partnership with Microsoft Research and between engineers and lawyers, I hope that some of what we have been able to do might inspire you here to do even bigger and better things than we've done. I'll give you two examples that more than anything else are the reason I was excited to have us make what is a large donation. The first is the work that we did inside Microsoft to address an important social and societal problem. It's the problem of child pornography. It was a problem that, frankly, was almost dead before the internet led to the unfortunate, almost ubiquitous spread of images of exploited children. And it's a horrific crime because if you are a victim of it, the crime doesn't end until the images are gone. And because the images can be replicated and spread, getting them off the internet is a huge challenge. And yet it's a challenge we took on inside the company with people from Microsoft Research and universities and lawyers working with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And we developed a technology called PhotoDNA, a technology that could be used to identify images and then find them across the internet and then get them taken down. But it's a solution that would never have come to life if engineers and lawyers and social scientists had not found a way to work together. And we built on that example with others. We took on the challenge, for example, of trying to get botnets taken down off the internet. And what the lawyers learned from the engineers, as many of you may know, was that these botnets often ended up capturing literally hundreds of thousands or even millions of PCs around the world through a relatively small number of servers that acted as command and control servers. And our engineers figured out that if you could just replace these servers and take them out and put in place other servers that instead of spreading spam and malware across the internet would instead spread a message telling people how to clean up their PC, you could take a horrific thing down. And then our lawyers went to work and realized that if they took a trademark law that had been passed in the 1940s, they could go to court and innovate with a new legal technique and get court orders that were implemented by US Marshals, and in a single day, clean up an entire botnet. In fact, in one day, They managed to reduce the amount of spam on the internet by over half. And yet it was, again, something that we had never seen anywhere else, and that was engineers and social scientists and lawyers innovating together. As I've tried to spread this message, frankly, around the world and interest more governments, we've seen some more governments take up this opportunity. But this is a first. This Tech Policy Lab is the first time, I believe, anywhere in the world that a major university is investing in the creation of a center that will bring people together from these disciplines and figure out how technology and the law can move together to solve important societal problems. That is exciting. That helps you understand why we wanted to do something like this. But it actually doesn't answer the question, why here? The answer is threefold. First, this is our home. And we are so committed to this region and this state and this economy and the opportunity to invest in things that will grow this region even further. But I have to admit, if that were the only reason, it would not have been enough. We would not have made this investment here. We are making this investment here because we know that we have the opportunity to build on something that is already great. We know how great this department in this building happens to be. And we know what we have the opportunity to build on, not only with the information school, but with a law school, I have to say, that has been especially innovative and groundbreaking since Dean Testi has come to lead it. It is that kind of strength and that kind of inspiration that makes this kind of investment decision an easy one for us to make. So I want you to know, we are excited. We are excited because we've seen ourselves a glimpse of what this kind of interdisciplinary work can do. And we are excited because, frankly, we think you're probably going to do a lot more than we've been ever able to do by ourselves. And in doing it, we'll do something not only great here in Puget Sound, we'll do it in a way that will continue to strengthen this region's leadership role, not just in the Pacific Northwest, not just in the United States, but for the planet as a whole. So thank you very much. Please welcome Peter Lee, head of Microsoft Research.
Well, let me just say also, could not be happier to be here, and also am extremely proud to see so many of my colleagues from University of Washington, and also many of our researchers from across Microsoft Research here. I wanted to say a little bit about the research opportunities and impress upon all of you just how remarkable this opportunity is. In fact, put yourself just even 10 years ago, the idea of putting the three words technology, policy, and laboratory together in one phrase would have been unheard of. It's just incredible how far we've come in the opportunity that we have here. Now, talking about research opportunity, we know now that there are several ingredients to making great research successful. One is to be collaborative. And one thing that we've learned, and one thing that was incredibly influential in our desire to get involved with the University of Washington on this, was seeing the depth and the genuine nature of the collaborations across so many different and disparate parts of the university. In fact, that has been influential in sparking and deepening the collaborations between Microsoft Research and our Legal and Community Affairs division in Microsoft. Imagine, for us, the power that we get out of that deeper collaboration. It's just transformational. The second aspect has to do with pursuing multidisciplinary concepts. Now, in basic computer science, we are seeing an absolute transformation. In the same way that over the past 15 years, the physical sciences and the life sciences have been just utterly transformed by advances in computing and computer science, we are now just in the early stages of an even bigger transformation in the social sciences, in economics, in policy, and in law. And that transformation is going to fuel tremendous growth and tremendous new opportunity in the basic research that we do in the academic community as well as at Microsoft Research. And with that transformation, we must ask the question, how do we turn the new research ideas, the new knowledge, the new insights, and the new truths that emerge from great research into actions and into solutions that make our lives and our societies better? And a technology policy lab is absolutely one of the most effective ways that we can do that. Technology policy and research and technology policy holds out the promise to take all of our emerging new ideas in the computational social sciences, computational economics, and a huge range of interactions blending the social with the virtual into the sphere of law, of policymaking, and of governance. Over the next 10 to 15 years, I think nothing will prove to be more transformational for the way that we live and for the ways that we govern and interact with each other. Now, I do want to also say that these things really matter today. It's not just something that extends out 10 to 15 years ago. I arrived at Microsoft Research just 3 years ago. It feels like yesterday. But before I was at Microsoft Research, I was actually here on the campus with Yoshi Kono and his group. And what he did for me was put me in a car, told me to turn it on and start driving. And then, of course, before I knew it, I was no longer in control. I couldn't turn off the car. I couldn't steer the car. I couldn't unlock the car doors. And that type of incredible technical revelation was absolutely influential. In fact, I brought that back to DARPA, and immediately, for the Secretary of Defense, we ended up taking immediate steps in order to avoid the potential for eavesdropping that could be exploited by exactly the same kinds of technologies that Yoshi's group was developing. Those technologies and those ideas now are instrumental in collaborations in Microsoft Research. Also, at DARPA, we were deeply engaged in very significant questions about the freedom to speak and the freedom to assemble on the internet. And during the Iranian Twitter revolution, you might remember in 2009, it became known to our government that the regime in Iran was using cybersecurity technologies to track and hunt down and prosecute dissidents in the country who were trying to assemble and speak freely through Friendster, through Twitter, and through other social media channels. We ended up developing new technologies in order to protect the privacy and anonymity and the location independence of people trying to assemble and speak freely. Today, in Microsoft Research, these technologies are absolutely essential in understanding the good and the bad sides of all of our technologies in computer security, in computer privacy, and in doing things like understanding the social aspects of when people, say in Mexico, are trying to band together on the internet to have a concerted effort to socialize, to have warnings about impending activities and good awareness of crime. The policy implications of these things have always traditionally in computer science research been of a secondary concern, of a concern that comes after the development of the technology. And as we move forward over the next decade, it will become imperative for these policy implications to be developed hand in hand with the basic computing technology. The last thing I would like to say has to do now with the third element beyond collaboration and multidisciplinary approaches to great research, which is timing. And I think that in this case, the timing really couldn't be better. We feel just incredibly excited that we're catching a wave, that we're getting on the ground floor of really an important new dimension in basic research and in the application of that basic research. We're all in with the Technology Policy Lab, and we expect to see many, many great results coming forward that will have a real impact on how we live and how we govern ourselves and how we define our laws. So thank you very much.
So before these three leave the stage, I just want to say that the University of Washington has no better friend than Microsoft, and the University of Washington also has no better friend than Brad Smith. This is his second contribution to UW today. The first was speaking to the Board of Regents about the UW Futures Report, which you'll read about. Peter has, of course, been a friend of the computer science community and us here at UW for many, many years, and President Young has been a strong supporter of all the units involved in this effort. So Brad and Peter and President Young, thank you so much. We appreciate it enormously. Thank you. Thank you so much. So let me now ask our three principals, Batya Friedman, Ryan Kalo, and Yoshi Kono, to join us on stage. And the format is in fact going to be a conversation and panel among them to inform you about the direction this lab will take. As they take their seats, let me mention a few other state officials who are here today. I mentioned Representative Ross Hunter a minute ago. There are at least two other folks here from the state. Richard Locke, who's the Executive Director of the Office of Economic Development and Competitiveness, is here. And Will Saunders, who I've known for a number of years, who is the Director of Broadband Policy and Program Director in the Department of Commerce. So thank you for being here, and again, thank all of you for being here today. So let me now get off stage and let Ryan introduce the panel.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Pretty well? Yeah, this is such a beautiful atrium here. It's just a gorgeous building. So excited that we were able to have this here. Can everybody hear me okay? Pretty well? Good. All right, so my name is Ryan Kalo, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Washington School of Law. Along with my colleagues on stage, I direct the new Tech Policy Lab at the University of Washington, which is kind of an exciting thing to be able to say today, actually. So Yoshi Kono is an associate professor of computer science and engineering, and Batya Friedman is a professor at the Information School. You'll hear from them both in a few minutes, and you'll see why I'm so thrilled to be working with them both. I want to tell you a little bit about the way that the Tech Policy Lab came together. I mean, in a way, the Tech Policy Lab came together with remarkable speed. Right? I mean, I just joined the University of Washington last year, right? And I started talking to Allison Rosenberg at Microsoft. We had our first of what ended up being many discussions, just in the winter, right? And here we are. But the right conditions for the lab did not arise overnight. Yoshi and Batya have been working together at the intersection of values and technology for many years now. You can actually see some evidence of their collaboration on the tables out there if you get a chance during the reception. Yoshi and I have been talking about privacy and security, gosh, I mean, since my early days at Stanford Law School, where I was immediately prior to UW. But importantly, there's a culture of collaboration and entrepreneurship in place at UW that make things like the lab possible. I know my dean, Kelly Testi, and the leaders of the other units here represented, embraced this novel idea for a tech policy lab with enthusiasm and excitement. And that's actually a rare thing. In other words, the idea that rather than sort of have to think about the details and work to, it was just everybody was excited about it and everybody did everything in their power to make it happen smoothly. So here we are just a short time later. And it really is novel. I mean, there are other groups in the United States and abroad that think about technology policy, right? But I'm aware of no group that integrates technical, legal, and humanistic approaches to technology policy as fully as we intend to do in the coming years. Okay, so as to the work of the lab itself, it is my own intuition that few contemporary problems can be solved by reference to any one discipline. And yet, technologists and policymakers don't necessarily talk to one another. Yoshi, Batya, and I are experts in different disciplines with a track record of interdisciplinary collaboration and a track record, frankly, of impact. Yoshi's work on security of networked vehicles, you've heard about this a little bit already, this amazing work with cars and embedded medical devices and so forth, is really changing how cars and other hardware is built. My work on drones and privacy, including testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee this year, has changed the direction and helped set the terms of that debate. And Bhatia's work on value-sensitive design has not only made it more likely that human values will be taken into account into the design of technology, but also given designers the tools and the vocabulary to actually do so. So we formed this lab to, one, design technologies that better take law and policy constraints into account, and two, to help policymakers better understand the technology and context that they would regulate. We intend to involve students in our and other units quite heavily. So a third goal of the lab is to produce graduates who know how to work with others of diverse training. And again, we think this is going to be useful and a competitive differentiator for our students vis-a-vis other schools. So I'm going to turn this over to Yoshi to give some examples of our approach in a second, but before I do, I wanted to take a moment to thank a couple of people. Obviously, Brad and Peter and President Young, we really appreciate this support so much in making this possible. Also, Allison Rosenberg and Catherine Neo, we really have appreciated your guidance and help in all of this, and being champions for us. Ed Lazowska, I told myself that word like 40 times, and I said, it's like when you try not to think about white rabbits. But anyway, Ed, you've been a great, enormous, not even emceeing tonight, but just such an enormous, great support and guidance and resource to us. And, as you know, you and Yoshi were instrumental in getting me to come here. And so I just appreciate that so much on a personal level as well. And of course, the leadership and staff of the Information School, the Computer Science and Engineering Unit, and the Law School, all of whom have contributed mightily for the formation of this lab. I also wanted to introduce and thank Emily McReynolds. Emily, where are you right now, Emily? She's in the back right there. So Emily is our managing fellow for the lab, and she's been just a crucial addition to our team, and she started to shoulder just tremendous responsibility from day one. And so I hope you could take the opportunity to meet her tonight or sometime soon. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over for a moment to Yoshi to set up a little bit about what we're doing in the coming few years. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ryan, and thank you everyone for coming here today. One of the things that Ryan mentioned, and I think everyone already mentioned, is that we're incredibly collaborative here at the University of Washington. And I feel like, since the car work was mentioned, I wanted to single out Carl, Francie, and Melody, who all had a role one way or another in helping us remotely compromise an automobile, actually from 1,000 miles away. But to return the topic to this lab that we are creating, as people mentioned, we plan to strategically consider a number of different technology areas from the policy side, from the social side, and from a technology perspective. For example, we plan to consider technology and policy issues related to big data, related to censorship, and also related to the Internet of Things. And as Ryan said, we have what I like to call a magical combination: expertise in technology, in policy, in social sciences, in design, plus a shared vision and strong evidence of successful collaboration. What we would like to do over the course of the next few minutes is give you an example of how the Technology Policy Lab at UW will tackle problems at the intersection of technology and policy. Through our collaborations, we will impact technology by making it informed about policy and social sciences. And we will impact future policy by making it informed about the real technical possibilities and constraints. The example that I would like to focus on is augmented reality, which is one of the topics that we plan to study in this lab. One of the things that the Technology Policy Labs to do is we like to take target technologies that are right at their inflection point. Peter used the example of a wave, and I'll use the same example. We can focus on a technology before the wave actually comes, if you take the surfer analogy, and we might work very, very hard but have little impact. Or you could take a technology after the wave has already come and actually not be able to ride that wave. But what we want to be able to do is to pick a technology right at the inflection point, right at the point where it's at the stage to have significant impact. And at that point, we can influence both the technology and the policy. So augmented reality is the example technology that we're going to focus on that we believe is right at the stage where over the next 5, 10, or 15 years we'll have significant innovation And so it is at the right time to consider the technology and policy and social issues of augmented reality. So what is augmented reality? Many of you have probably heard the term a little bit, and there's actually a broad definition of term. In fact, it's a term that's been used for decades now, but again, in the research community, but again, is at the cusp of actually having significant impact within companies. For our purposes, augmented reality systems sense properties of the physical world and overlay computer-generated visual, audio, and haptic signals onto the real world in real time. So for example, a person could be wearing some sort of glasses with a transparent heads-up display and a camera that takes photographs of the world from the wearer's point of view. And then this device could overlay maps or directions on top of that real-world display. This device could also automatically identify objects or people in the room and perhaps add a little bit of descriptive text below the object. For example, if I were to walk into a room and Ryan comes visible within my glasses' field of vision, the text Ryan Kalo could be displayed momentarily under Ryan's face. Another example that I've recently become very interested in, and the students in my lab will attest to this, is just kind of out of idle curiosity, tracking my caloric intake. How much do I actually eat every day? So I have this app on my phone that can scan barcodes, and so before I eat anything, I just take my phone, I try to position it in the right way, scan the barcode, and then say, okay, if I eat this yogurt, I know how much calories it'll be, and then I can add it to my diary. The whole process is actually incredibly time-consuming, and so I would love it if I could wear a pair of glasses, walk up to some food or go to the grocery store and immediately see in my heads-up display how much calories are in this item and how much it would contribute to my daily caloric intake if I were to eat it, and then automatically add it to my diary if I do. And augmented reality systems in the future will be able to do this type of thing. So I want to play out this scenario a little bit more just to make sure you understand kind of the technology that we're talking about. So imagining that I'm wearing these sorts of glasses that I just described, and I maybe go over to Batya's house or Ryan's house or maybe Batya's house for a late night work session. And like all my augmented reality apps, I leave it running all the time. And leaving it running all the time is useful because let's say that Batya and I, late night work session, we decide we want to eat some popcorn. We bring out the bag of popcorn, the jar of popcorn, and immediately I'll say, okay, it's 31 calories if I have a cup. And it's just make the user interaction very seamless. So this is the type of technology that will revolutionize the way we interact with the world. So there are a number of hard issues that the designers of these technologies, the users of these technologies, policymakers who are considering these technologies, and in fact bystanders who might not be using the technology but might be in the same room as someone using the technology will have to consider. And in fact, there's a feedback loop between these communities, because the policy decisions could affect the technology, and the technology decisions could affect the policy. So what I'm going to do is start a mini panel-like discussion amongst the three of us. Well, I will begin by discussing some technology issues, and though, of course, the three of us are actually multidisciplinary to begin with. So one issue is recording. When exactly should the camera be taking pictures and scanning barcodes? As I described the technology a few moments ago, it is actually constantly taking pictures and then recognizing these barcodes automatically. So a question that you might, actually I want you to all take a moment and imagine that you're wearing these type of glasses that are constantly taking pictures and has this nice benefit that when you walk into the restaurant or walk into a friend's house and see a food item, you know how many calories are in that food item. So having imagined this, what do you think should be the behavior if you were to walk into a bathroom? Should it still be taking pictures all the time? Even should it still be taking pictures even if it were to then suddenly just throw them away if it did not see a barcode? But of course, what if you really wanted that bag of chips when you're in the bathroom? Maybe it should recognize that barcode. Also, what happens when the user wears this device in a movie theater, say, or goes into a bar, and so on? Another question you might ask is, what happens when the person wearing this device interacts with another person who, for a variety of reasons, maybe even religious reasons, would not like to ever have his or her picture taken? These are very tough questions, but fortunately, there are a number of technical tools we can use to give people more control over when and where recordings take place. For example, some researchers have proposed giving people the ability to opt out of recordings, maybe by wearing a specific article of clothing or a certain type of hat, or maybe by wearing a device or keeping a device in their pocket that broadcasts a signal saying, I don't want to be recorded. Another researcher here at the University of Washington, actually, Shwetak Patel, proposed a method to detect camera lenses remotely and then shine a beam of light or a pulse of light at those camera lenses that would make it so that if someone were to take a picture with that camera, the picture would be blurry. So this is an opportunity for an owner of an environment, maybe the owner of a bar, the owner of a movie theater, the person who's owning the bathroom, to use this device and disable all cameras in that environment. So these are a number of methods that we can choose, but which methods should a really deployed system actually use? Maybe you have a choice of your preferred method, but is that the preferred method of the person sitting next to you, or the policymaker, or the technology designer? We don't know, but through the course of this lab, these are the types of questions we want to address. Some issues might be, should the device be record by default, always recording unless you opt out? Or should it be never recording unless someone were to opt in? Or let's consider this system that I described that shines a beam of light at a camera lens that would prevent it from taking a picture. Should a user be able to actually, of an augmented reality device, be able to override that in some way and actually still be able to take a picture in the bathroom or in the movie theater or anywhere else? Another issue that we need to consider is the transmission and storage of data. So as I described the basic system, every time I take a picture, something happens. Every time I see a barcode, that barcode is sent to a server that then looks up that food item in a database and then returns the caloric information to me. But maybe if it scans a book, it just throws that data away. So what are the implications of sending all this barcode information and other information about my environment to this server in the cloud? Now, of course, the communication should be encrypted, and of course, we have expertise in encryption here, and we can address that. But are there risks in even exposing this data to the cloud? So for example, what happens if I were to wear this technology at my friend's house, and it automatically scans a number of items that they would consider sensitive? For example, their excess supply of alcohol, or maybe a bunch of controversial books, or anything else that they might consider sensitive. What happens when my device scans it and then starts uploading that information to the cloud for processing? So there are a number of technical approaches that we can consider here. The basic design I described sent all the data to the cloud, and then which meant that the device itself didn't have to store much information. We could, of course, consider an alternate version of this technology, where this big database is stored on the device, and so all the lookups happen locally, takes up more storage space on the device. We could also consider other points in the spectrum. For example, the entire database could be stored on the cloud, but the types of queries that we would make, a little bit more computationally expensive, but the queries that we would make to the server would somehow let the device learn the caloric intake amount for this piece of food, but would actually not reveal to the server which actual food item I am looking at. So another related to this issue, we also need to think about data retention. So let's say that I'm actually recording food items and adding it to my diary. What happens if? What are the implications if that information is stored for a day, for a week, for a year? What happens to log information and so on? So there's a lot of technical choices we can make, but I think that one of the main points is that although there are a lot of technology directions that we can head, technologists should not be choosing those directions by themselves. We do need to consider the broader legal framework, and we need to consider society. And so with that, I would like to hand the microphone over to Ryan.
Okay, so let's say that you're a regulator and you want to now regulate augmented reality. You're concerned about it, you read an article about it, and somebody has criticized it, and now you want to do something about it, right? We've seen this time and time again with different technologies, and we're going to see it with augmented reality, right? What's the target? What are you aiming at? What is the current state of the technology, and how exactly does it work? But not just that, is it contingent? Does it have to work that way, or could it work a different way, right? If you are a technologist and you're trying to pick among different possible design patterns, what are the ramifications of then designing it in that way? So, for instance, If you're trying to decide how long to store this information, did you know that after a certain number of, I would argue, arbitrary number of days, right? If it's in storage in the cloud, it can be accessed by law enforcement without a warrant, with a mere subpoena, which is essentially like a letter saying, I want it, right? Okay? Or if you're trying to think through, issues about what the interaction might be with the Fourth Amendment, right? You just need to understand sort of how the technology works, what are the potential countermeasures, and so forth. Why? Well, because it turns out that Fourth Amendment law is pegged to a reasonable expectation of privacy. And what makes your expectation of privacy reasonable? And that is the possibility that this will happen. So as I think about, and let's just stick on privacy for just one moment. As I think about that, the main issues we have in privacy today, I would argue, are basically as follows. Number one, do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in public, right? The idea, ordinarily the conception of privacy is you walk out in public or even in this room and you don't have any expectation of privacy. It's a binary conception. You have expectation or you don't. If you're out in public, you do not. And the idea is you put yourself out in public, right? But the question is, yes, you put yourself out in public, but did you put yourself out coupled with your identity, coupled with how you vote, coupled with the value of your house, coupled with all the other things that augmented reality will present? Did you put yourself in public for that reason? Likely not. Or take the third-party doctrine. The third-party doctrine, it's, the reason I have so little hair is because I tear my hair out over the third-party doctrine. Todd, you probably same reason, right? And the third-party doctrine is this idea that when you commit data to a third party, like a server, like a corporate server, for instance, you give up essentially your expectation there. And again, the government, now there might be other statutory laws, but under the Fourth Amendment, the government can get that information. It's as though you've given the trash to the trashmen, the trash people. It's like you've given that to a third party and you've given away the expectation of it. So how does that interact with augmented reality? The idea that you would record everything that happens around you, and suddenly that would be in some server somewhere. And the person from the ACLU is looking at me like, yeah, that's right, and that's dangerous, right? What is the interaction there? And that depends. It depends a lot on, is it encrypted and so forth. And so these technological issues end up interacting in an interesting way. I'll give you another one that maybe you hadn't necessarily thought of. So nowadays we talk a lot about the importance of metadata. And we talk about that because of the fact that the government, it turns out, was subpoenaing, was grabbing a lot of metadata, meaning not the content of your phone calls necessarily or the content of your emails, but sort of who you emailed and who you called, right? And the idea is that metadata is different from the actual content there. It's not like they're listening to your phone call, they're just noticing who you're interacting with, okay? But if lots of kinds of people are recording everything that they see, who you hang out with ends up being a log of who is maybe seeing the things that you're working on. And so the idea that metadata could connect you to content with augmented reality in a new way, I think is also interesting. Who you know equals who might have a record of the event, stored, by the way, helpfully with a third party. The other thing is, switching gears for a moment to consumer privacy, with consumer privacy, one of the driving forces in consumer privacy is notice and consent. I mean, that's just something that you see again and again. It's arguably the most important of the fair information practice principles. It's just an absolutely driving force in consumer privacy today, for better or for worse. I've actually argued that it's for better in the past. How do you do notice and consent with wearable computers, right? How do you know that someone's recording you? How do you have any expectation as a third party about what's going to be happening with this data? There's not even the terms of service that you're never going to read, right? So, all of these things, and many, many more. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg. What does it mean to be a witness to something, right? What does it mean to incriminate yourself? Right? You cannot be compelled to testify against yourself, and neither can your spouse. Can your glasses? And so each of these things ends up telling you what is possible as a technologist, and telling you what is possible as a lawyer, and telling you, and that is just layering on, by the way, the legal framework that we see today on top of what Yoshi was saying. And with that, I'm going to turn it over now to another of our colleagues, Batya Friedman. Thanks.
So thus far, Yoshi and Ryan have been talking about augmented reality, but they've been talking about it in terms of data flow. So data that is sensed in the environment, data that is overlaid on the physical environment, data that might be recorded, data that might be stored. What I'd like to do is extend this discussion of augmented reality to action, and actually the relationship between thought and action. So here's a case in point. Our colleagues at UW, Raj Rao and his team in computer science, have recently demonstrated how one person's thought can now result in the motor movement of another person's body. So imagine a person in a wheelchair who has an aid, and now that person thinks what they want, and lo and behold, that thought causes the action of his or her aid to help that person. Or imagine a choreographer, someone who is an older person, who still has marvelous ideas about dance and would like to show them, and now that person can think, and those movements can actually be realized in a younger dancer. Okay, so now that we have that, this direct connection between thought and action, should we now begin to regulate thought? And who's responsible if my thought causes somebody else's body part to act, which results in some harm? Empirically, does that person experience an intention to act? When we talk about being responsible or accountable for actions, it's because you often had an intent to act. And from the perspective of design, what do we build into these technologies so that through their interaction and use, we clarify this situation, so that both the thinker and then the body part actor actually through their interactions understand their roles in this? And from a policy perspective, what policies and laws should regulate what sorts of actions a person can now take? And do we need anything new here? Or does everything that we already have just cover this? Because, well, we're already all acting in the world, right? We're thinking and acting within our own single integrated bodies. Now, these are just not fantasy questions, but real pragmatic challenges for near-term modern society. Now, my personal views on this is that all of this is far too complex to know in advance. Yet, we will soon start building the infrastructure, the technical infrastructure, and the low-level protocols on which policies will later be layered. So what is built very soon in that infrastructure will ultimately constrain what policies can be readily implemented in the future. So how do we build that infrastructure and protocols is critical. And how do we do that now so that we're in a better position later on as these technologies unfold and actually spread out into society? So here's a strategy. Let's think very broadly about potential policies. So the idea is not that we latch on to any one policy to advocate for it, but we actually think in a very broad and expansive way about the entire range of policies that us society or societies, because this person who's thinking may get on an airplane and fly across the globe to a person who's acting somewhere else. And what we do is we use that to build infrastructure and protocols to support as wide a range of these policies as possible. So what does that do? Well, in some sense, it sidesteps making the hard decisions right now about the policies. But in another sense, what it actually does is it enables those people, it positions society and the policymakers who are going to be having to make policies in a society where those technologies are deployed to have a range of possibility with respect to establishing policy as the technology unfolds, right? So rather than now doing things within infrastructure that might constrain the action of policymakers later on, we think proactively, we build broad-based infrastructure, and what that does is it enables the policymakers in the future to have much greater freedom and opportunity to develop policies that will be hopefully as helpful as possible to those technologies. Moreover, what I want to point out is that social policy that makes really good sense when a technology is new, when people are first assimilating it into their lives, may not be the policy that we want to live with as we become used to that technology and as it unfolds and becomes pervasive in society. And so we too, with an infrastructure like this, are actually positioned to have early stage policy that helps us make those transitions, and then we're positioned to move towards the kinds of policies that make sense when we've all assimilated and come to know what it is that we can do, what it means to act with these kinds of technologies. So now I'm going to pass perhaps to Ryan.
So, I mean, maybe we can just sit down for now. Yeah. I mean, so what's so exciting to me about the lab is the fact that, you know, we get to sit down around a table, the three of us, and have conversations and bring to bear completely different lenses. And I have to tell you that this has in many times sort of changed the way I think. And even this sort of conversation now has made me change a little bit the way I think about some of these issues. You know, as to your point about, you know, making a technology in advance that then permits us to go in one direction or another depending on the way that society unfolds, you know, that's one, you know, one possible outcome. So it's like in one instance, you know, maybe you want to export a particular technology to another country, right? And I just wanted to sort of think through, in a situation where you wanted to export a particular technology to another country, would you want to preserve that open-endedness, right? In other words, if you're worried about what they're going to do with it and you think you know, would you not want to constrain that technology so that they can't use it to make a different normative choice than we did in the United States, right? Whereas if you're exporting it to a country where you believe that there's a full panoply of options and it's democratically understood what the right policy outcomes are going to be, right? Then in that society, would you make different choices, right? And so that's what your discussion arose in me and I sort of thinking about regulating technology.
Yeah, I think
This part wasn't planned, by the way. This part right here is purposely impromptu, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the main takeaway point for me is that through the Tech Policy Lab, bringing the legal aspect and the social aspect and design aspect and the technology aspect all together, is that we can really have profound impact on technologies as they are emerging rather than after they have arisen. So some of the things that we've done, for example, with automobiles and medical devices and so on, is we've taken a technology that is mainstream and we have found a number of, you know, what we believe to be significant vulnerabilities, which have then led manufacturers to have to go back and rethink their technologies basically from the ground up, and also policymakers to understand, well, now that we have these technologies and we find these vulnerabilities and these issues, how are we supposed to respond? And one of the things that we really are trying to do is be very proactive and say, well, what technology is going to be really significant over the next 5, 10, 15 years, or maybe even 30 years, and what can we do today to understand the technology, policy, social aspects of that, and then also what can we do to then inform others? And so what can we do to inform policymakers? What can we do to inform technologists so these technologies can be designed in a way that takes everything into consideration? And then, of course, as Batya and Ryan mentioned, and actually Peter mentioned also in his remarks, is that we are taking a multinational view, like a broad stakeholder view of these technologies. We realize that a person with any of these technologies is not going to just stay in one country, but they're going to interact with a large number of other countries. And so, you know, from my perspective, if there's any one takeaway message, it is that we're going to try to look at the technologies as they're emerging, and through our past evidence of collaboration, and we all love working with each other, really try to address it from multiple perspectives.
Can I just give an example? And then this is again building from Batya's remarks about the idea of so we think about augmented reality again as being about the data. And in fact, until Batya sort of said that, I concede I didn't even think about that, right? I mean, when you augment reality, the idea is overlaying data. That's just what I thought. Not the idea that you would be able to affect reality, that you'd be able to change reality because of augmenting tool. And one of the things I was thinking about is, basically robotic surgery at a distance, right? And some folks here at the University of Washington, what I love about this place is that there's like not one thing where there's not an expert about it here at the University of Washington. It's great to be a part of a group like that. But anyway, the folks in electrical engineering are working on surgical platforms where a surgeon in, say, Los Angeles could be operating in say, Morocco, or could be operating in some, in somewhere else, sort of theater of war potentially, or anywhere else. And the idea is then again, your actions and perhaps even your thoughts are replicated in another area. And so then it raises all kinds of sort of really, almost in a sense, obvious legal questions. Like, for instance, for a surgeon in LA where she's doing surgery in Maine because she's the best surgeon in the world and she can't get there in time, what licensing scheme would be the appropriate one, and who's negligent, and what common law do you apply in the event of a medical malpractice, for instance, right? But then you have to think a lot about these sort of broader values context as well, and even what it means to be acted upon from remotely. And so, and that's a technology, I suppose, that is here right now, too.
Yeah, and Bobby may wanted to say something. I didn't mean to cut her off, but I do know that we started late, and in the interest of time, I will say that we'll probably will transition shortly, maybe with one more remark from Batya. But one of the also takeaway points, and one of the reasons we wanted to do this discussion about a particular technology is for you to see that we're bringing a lot of different perspectives to that technology, and in fact, all the other technologies that we will consider, and just kind of give you a glimpse into what those conversations are like.
Great. So I think this is a good place to transition, and I will be brief. What we hope that you have gotten from this sort of discussion is, rather than us telling you what it will be like to work in this tech policy lab, hopefully we've shown you just a tiny little bit of what these kinds of conversations are and what the challenges are and what the nature of the dialogue might be. You see the importance of the issues, the diverse perspectives, the excitement, the challenges, the potential fruitfulness, I hope, when these ideas butt up against each other and engage each other. Augmented reality is but one area in which we will be working, and we use this just as an exemplar, but we expect that we'll work on areas like big data, robotics, transnational, transcultural issues, censorship, Internet of Things, and we expect that other areas are going to emerge in the coming years, and we hope to be quite agile here in taking those up. I want to tell you just a little bit about the lab's activities, maybe for 2 or 3 minutes, and then I think we'll come to a close. But I do want to highlight how diverse and innovative the activities of the lab are going to be. So one kind of thing that we're going to do, probably the kind of thing you expect, are policy and technical analyses for specific emerging technologies, illustrated in part by this kind of a description. But from the law and policy perspective, we'll be surfacing constraints and positive directions for technology development. From the technology perspective, we're going to surface new ways of acting, being, or experiencing the world that may in some dimensions challenge existing law and policy. And we expect this work will result in original research, white papers in the policy sense, technical directions and guidelines for the technical community, comments, for instance, to the Federal Trade Commission. So that's one sort of work. But another sort of work that we're going to do is the development of suites of interactive toolkits. And here we envision tools, digital and non-digital, that can help policymakers understand better how a particular technology actually functions and see the results and implications of a particular policy or a set of policies on that technology's behavior. We also hope, if we're successful, to allow the public to interact with these tools as well, so it's not just elite policymakers, but actually engaged citizens. And for example, we might think about new technologies for manipulating data in the cloud as those emerge, and we might be able to build a digital tool that will help policymakers better understand the implications of proposed policies to regulate that data. So think about data disappearance and think about data in the cloud. We also hope to build tools to help scaffold dialogue, conversation among policymakers, technologists, and the public. The technology, that is digital tools, don't have to do all the work of making technical activity transparent and comprehensible. Technical people can do some of that work too, and maybe better, and policy people can do some of that work. But we know from our past interdisciplinary interactions, we need to support shared discourse. We need to support shared vocabulary, language, ways in which there are interactions between the technical and the policy, if those conversations are to take place constructively. So to give a flavor for the sorts of non-digital tools the Tech Policy Lab might develop, during the reception, I'd like to invite you to explore the tables, and you'll find 2 sample toolkits there. They're previously developed, so not results of the lab, but a flavor of the thing we might do. One is to support surfacing security threats and privacy to a wide range of human concerns. These are the security and privacy threat discovery cards. They are hot off the press, literally just about last week, developed by Yoshi, Tammy Denning, who's in the audience, Daisy Yu, who's in the audience, myself, and others. And another one to support envisioning the value implications of technologies. These are the envisioning cards developed by myself and also some of my students. So feel free to explore these during the reception. And then I want to say one quick word about bigger picture investigations. So this is a third type of activity. And we will, in addition to these specific investigations of specific technologies and tools, we are also going to investigate larger, what we might think of as meta issues. So, for example, observe this structural difference between the development of emerging technology and the development of law and policy. Technologists take what exists, they think about some new condition they want to create, and they think out of the box. They deviate from prior ways of thinking that's celebrated. Change is fast and sometimes radical. Law and policy, precedent-based. Strong incentive to use existing law and policy with as few changes as possible, and for good reason. But the change is slow and incremental, if at all. So here's a typical scenario. Technology leaps ahead, creates new ways for people to act, think, be in the world. Privacy and law lag behind. As a society, we experience a gap. We experience a time of lawlessness. So what can be done to close that gap? Well, we have some ideas that we'll be exploring, particularly as we gain experience with specific emerging technologies. Thus, in years 2, 3, and we hope the longer lifetime of the Tech Policy Lab, we're committed to this for a longer term, we'll be positioned to make progress on questions like these. So to close, we, Yoshi, Ryan, and myself, and I think the whole University of Washington community, are deeply grateful to Microsoft for this founding gift. For me personally, it's a privilege to do this work with Ryan and Yoshi. They are so talented, so smart, so insightful, and both such wonderful human beings. And we, in turn, feel that this gift is going to enable us, with students and other faculty who will participate in the Tech Policy Lab activities, to ask hard, complex questions about the relationship between technology and policy, to build tools to facilitate dialogue among technologists and policymakers, and to do so in a manner that is impartial, robust, and forward-thinking. Ultimately, our goal is to have a positive impact on society, on technical development and policy development, now and long into the future. And with that, I would like to thank you for joining us to launch UW's Tech Policy Lab. And now I'd like to invite you to celebrate with us at the reception. So please, thank you so much for being here, for coming, and join us. There are drinks and refreshments back around the tables, and we'll all be around circulating and hope to have conversation with you. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that was really, really, really great. Thank you. Yeah.
Well done, you guys. Do we get to like decommit?